Thanks for getting up so early. I know after a long night, late night last night. I'm going to take you on a little journey of discovery, which has been my own journey, and unfortunately it affects all of you as well, because it seems to be pointing us in the direction of our origins. And the more research I do in this area, the more amazing this information becomes, and the evidence is just getting more and more overwhelming. So some of the stuff you'll be familiar with, so just see that as revision or just reminding yourself some of the fundamentals. I've shortened the presentation dramatically because normally it's a full 3 hours. So there might seem to be subtle gaps here and there, so just ignore those if you can. I normally start with just showing this picture here to remind us where we live. And if you were in space and somebody asked you, where do you come from? You'd say, I come from Earth. You're not going to say, I come from the United States, or I come from South America, or I come from New Zealand. You'd say, I come from Earth. But unfortunately, the closer you get to this beautiful planet, the more dramatically and drastically things change. And we become incredibly separated and segregated. And from this beautiful unified representation of sacred geometry floating in space, we realize that we are a deeply divided species, divided on so many levels that we actually forget how deep these divisions go. And it's these divisions that are actually the power that is used, or the tools that are used against us to keep us separated and keep us at odds with each other, preventing us from acting and behaving like a unified species and a united species. And it's really, this is the beginning, because that's with that message I normally like to end. So to start off with, this is our home. And the one thing that many people are desperately unaware of is how incredibly strange the history of our planet is. And this goes beyond our species. This goes into other times and other areas of this planet in ancient times that we can't even imagine. And the history is so strange that it truly boggles our mind. And to prove that, I want to show you this footprint. This is a giant footprint. They're the toes, 5 beautiful toes. And this is about 1.5 hours away from my house in South Africa, on the border of Swaziland. And you know, this, you can do 2 things here. You can look at it and go, that's very nice, and shove it under the carpet. Or you can look at it and go, okay, we've got to deal with this. Because, are there any geologists here? Any? No geologists? Ah, excellent, excellent. So we can't speak badly about geologists then. They're really wonderful people. Now, I do like geologists, because at least you can have a normal discussion about things like this, because they call it as it is. And normally, this is rough granite, and the feedback I've got from geologists is that it freaks them out, because this footprint could be anything between 200 million and 3 billion years old. And those are the facts that we've got to deal with. It's not something we can just shove under the carpet. So, just to support the statement that the history of our planet is a lot stranger than what most people realize, here we go. Good starting point. Now, the other important thing to remind you of is that we live in an electromagnetic universe. That's our reality. The nature of our reality gets described as the electromagnetic universe, and everything spins and vibrates. And it's because of this spin and this vibrational activity that we can measure things, and we can detect things with the tools that we have. It gets a little weird and freaky when you start to talk to people like David Hudson, and he describes to you, well, there are times that things can't be measured because science doesn't allow us to measure things when they get to specific alchemical, states and altered states. But let's stick with the mainstream scientific explanations for the nature of reality as we face it today. Everything spins and vibrates. It seems to just materialize out of a point, or as Nassim Haramein calls, out of a vacuum. And there seems to be an infinite number of these points and vacuums, which are all little mini black holes, or mini singularities, and mini big bangs, if you want to call them that just create all this matter in the universe that we can measure, because we got at least some sense of technology. And because of the spin and vibration, we can detect things and the way they shape and form themselves in space. And this is just a beautiful example and representation of the spinning and vibrating motion of the galaxies that we observe in this beautiful universe of ours. Just to remind us that it actually is so, and that it's not just stuff that people are making up. What's interesting of the light sources that come out of the galactic centers, the ancient cultures called it the Great Sun, and it now seems from interesting scientific research and data that's coming out is that our sun, our closest star to us, is actually a conduit of this great sun and the energy forces that are coming out of the galactic center. And this seems to be the natural order of things in the universe as we started to wake up to these realities, right? But the other way that the electromagnetic universe gets shown to us is through this little two-dimensional chart, which can confuse you for the rest of your life if nobody explains it to you. Because it's a very basic explanation of a very complex situation, a three-dimensional and sometimes referred to as a holographic experience, and a holographic event in 3D that does really weird things. But here it is represented in very simple 2D with long waves starting there, and the waves get higher and higher, and they get up to this side. And what's important to note is that the only part of this electromagnetic spectrum that we think exists is the stuff we can see with our eyes, right? You heard Neil talk about this yesterday. And this is the little thin sliver that we can see with our eyes between 400 and 700 nanometers. As far as we're concerned, all this stuff here and all this stuff here to the left and to the right of it doesn't exist, because we can't see it and we can't feel it, can't touch it. And this is where the macho guys normally come in, you know, the beer slugging, rugby watching, football watching guys that sit at the pub, and many of them are my friends. You say, well, you know, I want some proof, I want some physical evidence. If I can't see it, I can't feel it, can't touch it, it doesn't exist. Bring me proof, I want to touch it. And to those people I normally say, okay, well in that case, if you think that if you can't feel it and you can't touch it, it doesn't exist, then you must be a big... It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? And they normally get the message. Some of them look at you like, what are you trying to say? So the interesting thing is the ancient cultures knew about this, just like they knew about the great sun and the energy fields that come out of it. And that's why the whole sun worshipping thing seems to be an ongoing ancient pastime of ancient cultures with advanced knowledge. Oh, okay. Thank you. Stay. The ancient cultures knew about all the stuff on the left and the stuff on the right, and they knew that it could be detected. They understood that they could interact with it, and they called it the third eye. Today we know it as the pineal gland. What's interesting to see is if you follow the work of David Wilcock, is that suddenly the internal structure of the pineal gland is actually directly linked to what's sometimes referred to as wormholes, or what do you call them? The stargates, that you can cross from one dimension to the other. And I'm doing some wonderful work with a guy called Willem de Swart in Johannesburg. He's a crazy scientist. We're working on a book called Secret Numbers of God that you're going to just love when it comes out. It pretty much decodes the whole numeric grid that we call the projected reality of our universe. It's spectacular work. I've never really come across anything like this, but it all starts to fit together. The more wider your research goes, the larger area you cover, from the physics to the metaphysics to the quantum physics to the really weird stuff and anatomy and genetics. The more you realize how things cross over and how everything seems to tie together with some fundamental truths that you can't escape. And this is amazing that we realize that our third eye, or our pineal gland, is something that's been well recognized for millennia by ancient cultures, and yet we have forgotten about it for some strange sequence of events. So, the other important thing to notice is that sound and frequency, sound especially, seems to be the common denominators of creation stories around the world with ancient cultures. And this can be depicted very quickly through Christianity, Hinduism, Egyptology, and Egyptian belief systems is, in Christianity there was the Word of God. God said, let there be light. So it is the Word of God that created and projected this universe that we call our home, right? And then in Hinduism, it's the or the Aum, the primordial creative sound that was the source of all things in the universe. And Egyptology, the Egyptians believed that the universe was sung into creation. And it can be explained with symbolism like this. There are the 6 aspects of or the Aum, the Om Mani Padme Hum, the 6 aspects in Christian, and the 6 aspects manifest themselves in this physical form of sound materializing in physical form. So now we're starting to see that there's 6 aspects that result in the materialization of physical form. This is an important thing, and in the Secret Numbers of God we go into great detail about why we can make this statement. It's not just something we throw out because it's a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's something we can actually support with scientific evidence and geometric evidence. In Christianity, we can reconcile Christian faith and this thing called sacred geometry. And that freaks a lot of people out. Oh, sacred geometry. Oh, well, the word sacred in Greek doesn't mean religious, it means fixed. Fixed geometry, as fixed by the rules of nature or fixed by the divine creative process. So you can't cheat this. You can't squeeze another circle in there and say, well, let's put another one in there. That's how it is. This is how nature has created it. You can't mess with it, right? So beautiful. 6 days of creation. On the 7th day, God rested. Beautiful metaphors for some of the stuff that we find coming out of the laws of nature. And the more you get into the sacred geometry and why it actually is sacred and why it is so fixed and works, then it becomes interesting. Because a lot of people study sacred geometry and they look at the pretty pictures and they see, but it's only when you start to understand why that is so, then it really blows your mind. But I don't have time to go into that today, but I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with some of those aspects. In Egyptology, we have the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus. And if you know music, you'll very quickly realize we're dealing with time signatures, musical ratios here. And it starts to all pull back, and you realize, okay, we're dealing with sound. Sound is this eternally important source of energy and creation, the creation process. So what this tells us is that things, vibration and frequency, harmonics and resonance are very, very important. And this is why certain numbers have played such an important role in all of human history. And these numbers, very quickly, 3, 7 and 8, 12 and 13, and that 22 and 7. 3, the Holy Trinity, probably the most important number we have. Everything seems to revert to 3, especially in the tarot cards and the incredibly important encoded meanings of the tarot cards. Incidentally, the tarot cards' meanings aren't encoded in their pretty pictures. Those are just reminders of what it talks about. The tarot cards' meanings are actually encoded in the ratios of the numbers of the cards. In there lie the answers to all the geometric ratios that are the foundation of the laws of nature and the sacred geometry that we then witness in physical form. So 3 is the Holy Trinity. In music, when you play the first note, it's the point of departure. The second note is your point of reference. And only when you add the third note, you create a harmonious chord. And then you can mess with that harmonious chord, and you can reduce people to tears, or make them excited, or happy, or sad, or angry, or scared, or whatever. And that's why musical soundtracks are such powerful things. They can do all that stuff. It's not the visuals that make you scared, or excited, or happy, or feel emotion. It's the music, the soundtrack that makes you feel that. It's spectacular when you do that. I used to teach that at a film school in South Africa, how powerful sound is in a movie. And it's a big awakening for the film students, because they want to come there and make beautiful pictures, you know. They forget about the sound. Very quickly wake up to realize, boy, if I don't have a good soundtrack, I'm going to, not really get anywhere. 7 and 8. Why 7 and 8? You saw Neil just talk yesterday show a lot of very important stuff about the number 7. Well, there's 7 whole notes in one harmonic resonant octave. The 8th note is the boundary and the start of the next harmonic resonant octave. So it binds them together. And this is why 7 is such a crucial and important number in all of creation and all our reality. right? So 7 and 8 are inextricably linked. It is also linked to the cube inside a sphere in sacred geometry, which is actually a three-dimensional representation of the hexagon or the Star of David. These things get really interesting, but again, I'm just throwing stuff at you because I want you to go away and just research this when you go away from here. There's not enough time here if you don't already know some of these things. 12 and 13 is just a three-dimensional representation of those 6 circles around 1, and also the numbers 7 and 8 as well. Because if you add the 5 semitones to the 7 whole notes in an octave, you get 12 complete tones or frequencies in one harmonic resonant octave. And the 13th note is the boundary and the beginning, the common beginning of the next harmonic resonant octave. So that's how those things are tied together. And then my favorite is this number 22. And you start to realize how important this 22 is and how it rules our reality. 22 letters in the original alphabets, 22 links in the Kabbalah tree of life and so forth. And you realize all these things are connected. Not because somebody thought it was a cool number to use, because these are the stuff created by the laws of nature that we can't get away from. And 22 upon 7, you all know, is pi. And it's this ratio, 22 upon 7, is the binding force and the ratio that holds the whole universe together. 22 over 7. Whether it's a circle this size or a sphere the size of the whole universe, their common denominator is 22 upon 7, pi. And that's beautiful because that's how we can explain how the whole creation or the whole universe vibrates in harmony through these harmonic resonant principles that could be described as sacred geometry. Okay, well, the pioneers of this understanding of sound and the creative processes, there have been many, but the 3 obvious ones that you'll be familiar with are Royal Raymond Drive, John Keely, and Nikola Tesla. Obviously, Royal Raymond Drive, the man who found the cure for all disease, used sound and frequencies of all kinds of, or nature of sound and frequencies to cure all disease. Remember, once you understand at which frequency something vibrates and at which it harmonizes and exists, then you can manipulate that thing, whether it's a virus, or whether it's a human body, whether it's whatever. Once you understand its frequency, you can mess with it. And that's how I believe, and a lot of amazing research has come out, how we are being messed with unconsciously by, the powers that were through frequency. Who are messing with us, who are encoding messages into our brains without us even realizing it. This stuff is serious, people. You've got to protect yourself against that. Psychic attacks are very serious things. Anyway, Royal Raymond Drive, man who found cure for all disease. If there's time, I can talk about another guy in South Africa called Paul Cravenstein, who I believe is the new Royal Raymond Drive, who's just gone to areas that are absolutely mind-boggling, curing all disease with energies. It's spectacular. The frequency thing infiltrates our lives on a daily basis. You put a thing in the wall, it keeps the mosquitoes away. You plug a thing over there, it keeps the rats away out of your roof. It's all frequency-based tools, but we don't think about them as that. Here's another lovely little gimmick that's a frequency-based tool. You rub your fingers on it and it removes the smell of onions from your fingers. It's all frequency-based stuff. And so we use this stuff on a daily basis, but we don't always think about how these frequency-based tools infiltrate our lives, and we use them everywhere. When you watch TV, radio, etc. All frequency. John Keely in 1888 gave us levitation. He crushed large blocks of stone into finest powder. He drilled holes into the hardest rock with sound frequency. He dissociated water. Most important thing that we learned from John Keely was to say that when his friend came and said, I want to do the same thing that you're doing, I want to levitate the stuff with your sound frequencies, he said, you can do that, but first I have to calibrate my device to the energy field of your body. Then only can you levitate the stuff with the device that I've created. And therein lies a really important clue. It's little clues like this that allow us to unlock other bits of information, like in Egyptology and what they were doing with the Ankhs that I'll come to a little bit later. Nikola Tesla obviously gave us free energy. He called it radiant energy. I believe that Nikola Tesla used sound frequencies as a source for those energy fields, or at least one of the sources for those energy fields. Now, one of the most important things that Tesla did, in my opinion, because this leads me to my research and my conclusions, is that he told us the earth rings like a bell. And it's these sound frequencies coming out of planet Earth everywhere. If you can tap into those sound frequencies, you're tapping into an infinite source of energy. And if you know how to convert that sound frequency into energy, which it already is, you can use it as a radiant form of energy wherever you are. Well, what does this have to do with ancient cultures and ancient civilizations, you might ask? Everything, because it points to the fact that what Tesla, Rife and Keeley and many others have rediscovered in recent times has been practiced and used by ancient cultures and civilizations almost 300,000 years ago at the southern tip of Africa. And I'm going to show you spectacular evidence for that. But that's not what our history books tell us, right? Our history books tell us that our ancient cultures were primitive. They were a bunch of long-haired idiots with clubs and living in caves, running up and down mountains, causing trouble. And when these guys with long hair had nothing better to do, and they were bored, they got together and they built stuff like this. That's what they keep telling us this over and over again. With ropes and pulleys and tree trunks and stuff, you know, they were just a bunch of idiots. And then I suddenly discovered that, oh boy, that they didn't just choose these big stones that they pulled with ropes and pulleys for 300 miles and for whatever reason, because they apparently needed to put them up to know where east was. Right? And that's what they did. And where the sun set. Oh, look, if you stand over here, the sun comes up exactly there. That's why they built Stonehenge and it sets over there. Are you out of your mind? What drugs are you on? You don't need to do that. Built this ridiculous thing, you know. But that's what our history books tell us, and our History Channel keeps repeating it over and over again, so everybody believes it, right? But then somebody out of the blue pipes up and says, oh, did you know that the stones were chosen for their acoustic properties? And I go, aha! Now it starts to ring a bell. And starts to link into all the other research. And when they were tired of building henges, these long-haired idiots, they got together and said, what else can we do? Let's build some statues. And they built a statue like this. And apparently also because they needed to know where east was in case they woke up in a drunken stupor. Say, I wonder where the sun comes up, Rube. I don't know. When they were tired of building statues, they said, what else haven't we built? And then one of the long-haired guys popped, hey, we haven't built platforms. Good, let's build platforms. And they got together and they built giant platforms. We don't know why they built these platforms, but they built them in any case. And then when they were tired of building platforms, they said, hey, we haven't built like these square things that come up to a point. I don't know, let's call them pyramids. And they got together and they built pyramids because they had nothing better to do. And then somebody said, hey, maybe we can bury somebody in there. It'll be a really cool place to bury somebody. So they built these things. And clearly when they were tired of that, they said, how can we confuse future generations to really freak these people out in future? Right? And then they said, hey, let's mold rocks together so they don't understand how we did it. They said, cool, let's do that. So they molded rocks together and they built these big things out of big rocks and they molded them together and put them into long walls, and boy, are we confused today. We have no idea what these long-haired idiots did. But they were primitive, right? What I'm doing here is showing you that the ancient cultures did stuff because they could. It was easy for them. We can't do this today. Scientists and civil engineers keep telling us, well, we can't do this, but we don't listen to them. We ignore that. We can't do this today. So how did they do that? It's interesting that when you start looking around at other independent researchers, more and more of them reach the same conclusion that I'm reaching, that they used sound as some sort of tool or energy to do this with. To soften the rock, or be able to mold it, or get it into an altered state that you can shape it, and then by removing the frequency and the energy or the sound, it hardens without heating it up. It's not about heating things up, it's all frequency that can materialize and dematerialize matter. And that seems to be the case here, like Carmen Bolter as well reaches that conclusion about the pyramids. And if you think that the pyramids are dead and give us no energy after all these thousands of years of being pillaged and ransacked and just, you know, looted, you'd be wrong, because there's still a lot of energy coming out of the pyramids. This is a photograph taken with special lenses that can show electromagnetic fields, and then it tells you, after all these years, it's still giving us energy. And when I saw this photograph, I got extremely excited, because it is exactly this research that I find in the ancient ruins in southern Africa, but even to a more spectacular fashion. So, and now I'm going to show you something about Stonehenge that I found when I was there, just to quickly kill the story or the rumor that Stonehenge is just a few thousand years old. I don't know what the latest rumor is. They made up a story. I think the last one they say it's about 7,000 BC or something. They keep changing their mind about it, right? Every year somebody comes up with a new story or a new theory. Well, fortunately, what we do know is that historians will lie to us, archaeologists will lie to us, geologists are a lot more truthful. What I'm going to show you is some geological evidence that Stonehenge is way more than 1 million years old. And I can't believe that nobody has picked this up. It's just, it's a shock to the system, right? So, first thing we need to identify is that we need to accept certain things. The first thing we need to accept that this stone here had a twin that used to stand up next to it, and they were connected at the top by a lintel. That twin fell down, and that's the stone lying over there behind it. When it fell down, they tell us that when it fell, it broke. And that's the break. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that that's not a few thousand years of erosion. We're dealing with several 100,000, probably more than 1 million years of erosion on sarsen stone. I can see our geologists nodding. It is not rocket science, people. Why has it not been picked up before? You know, I work with stones every day since I got involved in the stone ruins in South Africa. So I know what a fresh break looks like and what a break that's a year old or 100 years old based on the ruins I've been working. So when I saw this, I just went, excuse me, just, you know, tell me, I just want to verify that this stone fell over and it was the twin of this and it broke. And when they told me yes, I said, well, then we're dealing with something extremely old here. So, and to support that just in case you didn't get it, that break over there, the erosion on that break is so severe that it'll take probably millions of years to achieve that kind of level of erosion on extremely hard stone called sarsen, one of the hardest stones you can find.
I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say twin, do you mean the one laying on the ground is supposed to be the same size as the one that's still standing?
Yes. Yeah. It is. That's what they tell us. Yeah. It used to stand up next to this one, and then it fell down and it broke.
Oh, it doesn't continue all the way to the other side of the picture.
It continues to about there.
Yeah, I see.
And then another piece of evidence is this lintel. Look at this lovely crack through the lintel. Now we have to assume that no architect or builder is going to put up a lintel with a crack in it, right? So the crack must have happened after the lintel was put up. Look at the erosion around the crack. That gap up there and other parts at the bottom here, that gap is probably as deep as my hand. Once again, that erosion is not going to take place in a few thousand years. We're dealing with hundreds of thousands of years of erosion. So from now on, you can rest assured and be confident in your assumptions that Stonehenge is extremely old. How it's still standing and why it's still there, that's another mystery altogether. But the evidence is there that geology will not lie to us like our esteemed academics do from time to time. There is a modern-day pyramid builder right here in the USA. He lived in the southern tip of Florida. His name was Ed Leeds Goldman. One of the great mysteries of modern-day construction. He built this place called Coral Castle single-handedly out of these giant coral slabs, and some of them weigh more than 10 tons, according to the research that I've done, and amazing feats of architecture and construction that you cannot do on your own. And he did this completely single-handedly. Now, there were some stories about him when they used to deliver the stones to him. He'd make the truck drivers get out and stand around the corner, and he would single-handedly offload these himself. Now, what's going on here? How do you do that kind of thing, you know? And people don't think of this or think of it as strange. I think it's extremely strange that somebody could do this. Now, apparently one day he was seen by two schoolboys doing this offloading and manipulating of these giant 10-ton blocks. And they came home and they told their parents that we saw him maneuvering or offloading these stones. And his parents said, well, how did he do it? He said, well, he used ice cream cones. And you can imagine what happened, ice cream cones. Yeah, go to bed, you naughty boys. You're not getting any ice cream out of me. Well, I think kids can come up with much better ways to wangle ice cream out of their parents. So my guess is they were probably telling the truth. And when I heard ice cream cones, I went, aha. Because therein, just like John Keely's little clue, lies a huge amount of information that hopefully you'll get to see very quickly by the time we finish. So this is the tool that he used. It consists of 24 U-shaped magnets. Nobody seems to know how he did this. And I believe that there's a very important secret that he knew and used, just like all the pyramid builders and the guys that did the stuff in the ancient times, that he did encode in many of the encrypted messages at Coral Castle. It's actually quite mind-blowing, the encrypted information that he left behind, if you go and start researching this. But I now call this the ice cream cone phenomenon, and I want you to just memorize this. And these ice cream cones come in all shapes and sizes. And it's a beautiful little story, because the ancients in the ancient times also used ice cream cones to move all the blocks and things that they did. Spot the similarity. This is Ed Leeds-Kalnin's device. This is John Searle's energy device. This is a reconstructed Stonehenge. This is John Keely's device. Can you see the similarity here? Clearly these people figured out that within the sacred geometric circular shapes there lies the encoded energy or understanding or our ability to manipulate energy fields. And these are all just energy and levitation devices that they understood and they manufactured and they used with great success. We need to rediscover this, and I think we have rediscovered this, but we just don't know how to use it. And those people that try to launch it into the market, disappear without a trace. That's the other problem. Current belief is that Southern Africa was a sparsely populated continent with very few inhabitants before 1,000 years. A bunch of hunter-gatherers with their bows and arrows, shooting a buck here, shooting a buck there, hanging up the meat to make biltong. You call it jerky, but our biltong is a lot better, I must tell you. You must come and try it. When Kerry Cassidy came to South Africa, she couldn't get enough of it. She just, wherever we went, can we get some more biltong? Okay. Anyway, so the ancient ruins of South Africa tell us a completely different tale. That it was not a sparsely populated continent, that in fact it was a very densely populated continent with large numbers of people, with a huge population that lived there for many, many thousands of years. Now that's a shock to the system. This, you're not going to get past the academics very easily. Although they stare bluntly into the physical evidence, they will not accept it. It's quite spectacular. They were often called cattle kraal, or still are called cattle kraal, which are where you keep cattle in, right? Kraal, same kind of word. Cattle kraal, of little historic value. Well, I'm going to show you some of these kraal. The most important and first thing to note is that they are all circular, and yet each one is completely unique. Some of the internal structures are complex, some of the internal structures are very simple. Other important thing to note that the stuff in between lies buried beneath the soil. There's a lot of the stuff that you can't see around it. These are not just independent, standalone structures. They're connected by large construction of, like a web of material that holds it all together. Some of them are very complex, and here you start seeing the circular structure in the middle, and then around it this weird spider's web effect that actually runs and become the terraces that connect all of these things together. Again, just you only see these here, but in between it's all connected by walls that are covered by soil and terraces that run down the mountain over there. When you stand on the ground, you have no idea that this section here is attached to this circle here, and that there's a weird horseshoe shape there with a circle inside the horseshoe shape. And you go, okay, well this is interesting. This is why Johann Heine's photographs, aerial photographs that he took, and many of these are from his original photographs he started taking more than 20 years ago, are so crucial because they provide us with the evidence that still lies buried under the soil that you can't see while you're on the ground. There's another horseshoe shape in the forest inside a much larger circle. And then in between these obvious ones here and there, you see all the stuff that still lies buried beneath the soil that has not been excavated. And then they make flowers out of stones. Pretty flowers, because flowers are pretty, so they made flowers out of stones. I don't think so. Because you can only see it from the air, right? And these flower shapes are very, very important to what these people were doing. There's a road running here, which is badly eroded, and then it branches off into that flower shape there, and then from there it branches into this weird hexagonal shape here, which makes absolutely no sense. Why do you build a hexagonal honeycomb structure when you can't get into it, can't get to the central ones? The first references of these ruins we get in the 1500, early 1500s from the Portuguese, like Antonio Fernandes, when they came on land and started meeting the Karanga people or the Makaranga people, the children of the sun. That's what it means. Sun worshipping cultures in southern Africa, which is really alien because they're supposed to be in Egypt, North Africa, not in South Africa. What's going on here? Well, in the 11th century, we hear from Ahmed al-Biruni that describes the prosperous gold exports from the port of Sofala. The port of Sofala, and what I'm showing you here is the very badly understood history of southern Africa. It goes back about 4,000 years. That is so well documented, but hardly anybody knows about it. What you also find here is you discover the ancient kingdom of the Monomotapa, the kings of Monomotapa, the African golden kings that beat off the Moors and the Arabs for hundreds, if not thousands of years and tried to conquer them, but they could not conquer the African kings of Monomotapa. This is important information because they conquered the Near East and they conquered everywhere else, but they could not conquer these guys here. What does that tell us about these guys here? Quite a lot, doesn't it? So the port of Sofala was over there, which is today in Mozambique, right? And so the gold exports were already well recorded in those days. And then in 1200 we get told that Sofala and Monomotapa was a month, Monomotapa was a month journey inland from Sofala. This is a picture of drawing of Sofala from 1633. It was a well-developed port that was doing a lot of trade with the north and the east, on the east coast of Africa. There it is. Today it's known as the town of Beira in Mozambique. South Africa is just below it here. There's Zimbabwe. There's Botswana coming in there, and then you got Namibia over there, and South Africa joins them all together at the bottom here. So from Beira, Sofala is under the water today, and it's replaced by a town called Beira. When you go a month inland from Beira, or what it was, Sofala, you get to where the gold was. Well, what is a month inland? There you find a place called Masvingo, as it's known today. Well, what is it, Masvingo? The Great Zimbabwe Ruins. And we realize that the Great Zimbabwe Ruins were the headquarters of this Monomotapa African kingdom. And as they moved inland, they came across all these, the Portuguese I'm referring to, they came across all these amazing ancient ruins that could not be described or explained by the locals that lived there. When they asked them who built this, they said, we don't know who built it. But that's not what our modern day historians tell us. They tell us, oh, we know exactly who built it. Those people are stupid. We know who built it. And arrogance just is amazing. And this is a picture from 1891, just to show you how destroyed these ruins were. This is taken by Theodore Bent, who I'll talk about a bit later. When they got to Great Zimbabwe, this is the main entrance to Great Zimbabwe, which was reconstructed. There was a lintel above the main entrance to Great Zimbabwe ruins, which had a written script on it, which has never been translated or described or deciphered. Unfortunately, that lintel has gone missing, and we will never know what it said. I believe it's a very important clue, just like the raid on the Baghdad Museum. This is why this thing is missing, because in there lies a very important clue as to who the people were that built all this stuff. The links to northern civilizations are spectacular. All the ancient civilizations can be linked to southern Africa. And this is a big surprise to many people, because this is not what we get told or taught, or this is not what we expect. The Hindus, the Dravidian Hindus are there. When the Portuguese came on land, they met the Makomati people. Who are the Makomati people? The Hindu Dravidians that were mining gold and trading with gold for 2,000 years in southern Africa already. Wow, that's a big surprise. Right? And then some historians can trace them back to about 2000 BC already. But those guys get excommunicated from the academic circles. And then they encode their circular structures and their stone structures into sacred symbols, like the symbol of fertility, which is a Hindu symbol. And then the Phoenicians were there. This is a Phoenician carving on a stone bowl found near Great Zimbabwe ruins by Theodore Bent. The Romans were there. This Roman coin of Emperor Antoninus Pius from 138 AD was found 25 meters deep in a gold mine in Zimbabwe. The Sumerian Babylonians were there. This coin from 300 BC was found in the foundations of Marion Hill Monastery when they were digging that up in 1800s. And then the mystery of the Maltese cross. This is a headrest from South Africa, very similar to some of the headrests from North Africa and Egypt, except on this South African headrest you find these beautifully carved Maltese crosses on top of the headrest. And you go, what's going on here? And you start seeing how these northern cultures are totally encoded and cross over with a lot of activity in South Africa. And it starts to raise a big question, what's going on here? Well, then you start looking at these carvings on this very large glaciated rock near, at a place called Driekops Eiland near Kimberley, where all the diamonds come from, where De Beers started out in Kimberley. And you see these typical Sumerian crosses in a circle. Well, in Africa, these are known as Mabona, Lord of Light. And then these crosses in a circle. Note the rock. This rock is known as andesite, which is the same as diorite, extremely hard. It erodes very, very slowly. Notice the kind of erosion that you see on these. And then you see the Sumerian winged disc, beautifully carved on a stone near where I live. There's a cross, but it's very badly eroded. There's 3 wings that come out of it. And there's more on the other side, but you can't see it because it was taken at the wrong time of the day with sun right overhead. And what does this symbol mean in African culture? It means great is the all-seeing Lord of the sky, Mabona. And you go, okay, well here we got an interesting thing. What the hell's going on? Where did these Sumerians get all their stuff from, right? And then you start seeing more evidence of the sun-worshipping cultures. The Makalanga people, the R and the L gets exchanged. You see interesting radiating circles, radiating lines coming out of all kinds of shapes. Look at the state and the erosion on these carvings and the cracks through them. Look at the crack through this carving here and the extreme erosion on this very hard andesite stone. And this symbol, incidentally, is also one of the 4 seeds of life used by the Dogon people of Mali. So now you also got a link from Mali to South Africa. And you go, okay, this stuff is just getting thicker and thicker, isn't it? And look at the crack here, look at the erosion on that crack. Now just to draw a comparison, here's a statue of Khafra from 2550 BC, 4,500 year old statue, made out of the same kind of material. Look, this looks as if this was carved and polished yesterday, and yet they found this lying in the desert, right? And it was exposed for thousands of years. It should show extreme erosion. Well, compare that to this. What I'm trying to point out, that erosion can be used as a reference for aging things, and it is not often done. Well, this is why I assume and conclude that these carvings are probably way more than 100,000 years old, if this is 4,500 years old. Okay, it's a thumb suck. I'm just shooting from the hip, but I'll leave it up to you to figure this out for yourself. And then the Egyptian Ankh, this frequency device. We know it's a frequency device. It's like a tuning fork that they use to heal people with. We know they heal people with it because they show us in these pretty pictures. This chick here is healing this dude here. And this dude with a funny headdress is waiting for him to keel over or not. Okay, and what's important here, look, he's holding his own Ankh, she's holding her own Ankh. And clearly they're using the key to eternal life and universal knowledge. Yes, it's a frequency device, sound frequency, tuning fork. Royal Rife did it, healing people with sound and frequency. The Egyptians did it. And what's important, that each one of these gods had their own Ankh that was calibrated to their own energy field of their own body. They didn't exchange it like toothbrushes. Okay? They used their own, or you know what I mean. So each one had their own ankh with which they could do these amazing things. And I think John Keely's statement just really solidified that for me. That you need to have your own calibrated device to do these things with, to levitate, to drill holes, whatever. And if you think the ankh comes from Egypt, you'd be mistaken. There's another one of these ankhs in a radiating circle, telling us that whatever they were doing with these ankhs in South Africa, long before Egypt ever came to being, they knew it was a sound frequency and a radiating device that they could use for all these weird and wonderful things. What do other ancient texts tell us? Well, there we need to go to the oldest written text, the Sumerian tablets, and read about all the biblical stories, as you know. And they also tell us about the Anunnaki and the gods when they came down to earth from heaven and created the humans to do what? To mine the gold. And we go, well, that's a far-fetched story. I don't know if I can believe that. So what I like to do is find one Sumerian tablet or a reference that we can use as a basis for credibility. And that basis of credibility comes to us in these two tablets known as the Sumerian Kings List, found at different times in different places, and yet they give us exactly the same information. There's a slight difference in the dates, but I give them that leeway. That could just be misinterpretation. But they give us exactly the same names of 8 kings that ruled before the flood for more than 220,000 years. Now, the probability, and this is a scientific thing, probability is a well-accepted scientific argument, so I like to use that. So, the probability of these two being absolutely exactly the same is impossible. It's not possible that this could happen. So on this basis, we can deduce that the Sumerian tablets carry accurate information. They are not intent to deceive us or confuse us. And all we need to do is try and figure out the interpretation in some cases, and we have very important, accurate information of our human history. And this is a very important moment in all our lives when you realize this. Right, so what this tablet tells us, or these two tablets tell us, very important, after the kingship descended from heaven, and they keep repeating this, after kingship was lowered down from heaven to earth, and after kingship in various forms, but they keep repeating it, that there were some advanced beings who were up in the sky who appointed humans as their kings. After kingship descended to earth from heaven by the Anunnaki. And then they mention these 8 kings and how long they ruled. The names are exactly the same on the 2 tablets. And then they end with, and then the flood swept over, which is a very important statement, which supports more than 2,000 ancient cultures and their belief systems about this event called the flood. So, in a completely separate tablet from the Schoen collection in Oslo, we find this staggering bit of information. And now that we know that they tell us the truth, this is crucial. Okay? In distant days, in those days, after destinies had been decreed, after An and Enlil set up the regulations for heaven and earth. Regulations for heaven and earth? What the earth are these guys talking about? But they are telling us the truth. Enki, the exalted knowing God, by the rules for heaven and earth, the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, set up cities. And when you realize how the cities on this earth are perfectly placed, they're not randomly scattered. And I'm talking about New York, Washington, Moscow, Paris, London. There's a very specific grid upon which these cities are placed. All the way back to Eridu and Ur and all these ancient cities in the Near East, nothing has changed. It is a perfect grid, and you are going to freak out when you read the secret numbers of God, how perfect this grid is. There are no mistakes, people. And we read this in the Sumerian tablet. They set up the rules for heaven and earth. Well, when you follow the work of David Wilcock, he talks about the rules, and military and the Navy, they talk about these rules that have been set up, and there's some weird energy grid around planet Earth. And they depict these rules in the logos that they use, right? And the rules, these bands, refer to these rules around planet Earth. And this weird delta-shaped craft that we think is a delta-shaped craft. But once again, it's not a delta-shaped craft. It represents something. It's a symbol representing their understanding of what they refer to here. the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, I think they're referring to sacred geometry. The fixed rules, sacred, fixed rules for heaven and earth, sacred geometry. That's what I believe they're referring to. Nothing weird about this. Okay? And where do we get the answers for what's going on here? We have to go back to ancient Egypt. Look at this deeply encoded chest, but right in the middle we got a perfect sacred geometric circle with the pentagon, which has got nothing to do with devil worship. Pentagon, pentagram is actually the symbol of the divine. That's where we get the phi ratio, the 1.618, the golden mean ratio. It comes out of the pentagon or the pentagram. And therein lies the decoded information, or encoded with that. Can you see the delta-shaped aircraft? Bingo. You got 3 of them. 3 delta-shaped, or 4 of them, 5 of them. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 delta-shaped aircraft. Encoded in the sacred geometry, because the number 5 is the divine number out of which things materialize into number 6. 6 days of creation, 6 aspects of Om. And you start seeing how the numeric code allows us to reach this progression of understanding of the sacred geometry. And this is a spectacular bit of information that helps to pull this all together. And then we talk about the work in the Abzu. Abzu has been given many meanings, but primarily it's where the gold came from. So if we can find where the gold came from, then we will know what the Sumerian tablets refer to as the Abzu and put that argument to rest, right? So, where the landmass, the shape of a heart was given, in the lower part thereof, golden veins from earth's innards were abundant. Abzu, of gold the birthplace, here to the region the name gave. And, I'm going to show you some of these gold mines that were at the southern tip of Africa. And if you can link the shape of it to the shape of a heart, it tells us that you must have seen it from a severe height to recognize that. And then Enki decides to clone a species. And you realize that the symbol of Enki is still used by modern medicine today. Walk into any hospital, ask any medical student, where does your logo come from? They look at you like you're on drugs. I don't know, some ad agency designed it. That's what the most people probably think. They've got no idea they're dealing with one of the most sacred and encoded, energetically most important symbols that we have. And just like words and thoughts carry energy, symbols carry energy as well. It's all encoded. So let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker, the hardship work to take over. Let the being, the toil of the Anunnaki carry on his back. This is a spectacular bit of information. And then it carries on a bit further. A primitive worker shall be created. Our command he will understand. Our tools he will handle. To the Anunnaki in the Abzu relief shall come. And they link the Anunnaki and the Abzu. And over 600 African mythologies share the same bit of information. They talk about the sky gods that came down from the sky and created the African people. In the Zulu tradition, the big Zulu tribe in South Africa, of whom Creator Mutwa is the preeminent shaman, Creator Mutwa told me very clearly in his own words that the sky gods came down from the sky, the Abelungu, and they created the people to do what? To mine the gold. Zulu actually means people of the sky. Abelungu refers to the pale sky gods, which is an interesting recurring factor, that they refer to these sky gods as these pale sky gods, not reptilian. Pale sky gods. I like to draw this distinction. I know David Icke calls the Anunnaki reptilian. I disagree with that. I believe they were 2 completely different ETs. Enki is known as Enkai in African mythology, the creator god, and Solomon is known as Shulumi, the African king that had all the gold mines, probably in the land of Monomotapa. And we might have to re-examine who Solomon really was, because what I often show people in my longer presentations that we know less about our human origins and human history than is permissible by the laws of physics. And that's an interesting thought to just go through. Think about that for a second. So just next time somebody throws something out because they read it in a history book, just tell them, did you know that we know less about our human history than is permissible by the laws of physics? I'll go, what? How many of these ruins are there? This is where it really hits home. In 1891, Theodore Bent estimated there were about 4,000 of these. From horseback, he thought 4,000. In a sparsely populated continent, you go, okay, something is wrong with this picture. Okay? And then in my 1974, Roger Summers estimated 20,000 of these. By this time, I thought, okay, hold on. There's something dramatically wrong with this picture. A sparsely populated continent, because they estimate about before 1,000 years, there weren't more than 5,000 people living in the southern tip of Africa. I'm not kidding you. Go check up the history books. 5,000 people. And they got 20,000 stone ruins. Something wrong with this equation here, right? Then I got involved. 2007, I started counting these. Or I started walking up the mountains and analyzing them, and my immediate gut feel was about 100,000 of these ruins. And I thought, geez, okay, this is something ridiculous. So I called up Royal, the retired archaeologist at Wits University in Johannesburg, and I said, Rebel Mason, I said, Rebel, how many of these ruins do you think there are? And he said, at least 100,000. Just off the bat, 100,000. I was stunned by this. I said, Rebel, this is a fantastic thing, because I believe the same, but that means we got a big problem here. That means that we're sitting with a potential population of about 1 million people. And there was a silence on the phone, and he said, well, then there can't be 100,000. You know, you take the physical evidence, you say, well, it's not there, it doesn't exist. Because it was a sparsely populated continent, because I read that in a history book, and our history books are peer-reviewed, I want you to know. And that's when you realize that the peer review system is one of the most cancerous, incestuous systems that we have in academia. I'm glad you like that. So I started counting before I released my latest book, Temples of the African Gods. I thought I better count them because I don't want to just thumb suck like everybody else. Fortunately, I got Google, I got aerial photographs, I know what this stuff looks like on the ground, and I started counting. You can see at tops of the mountains. Tops of the mountains, you often see them beautifully exposed, and there's a specific reason for that. And then I extrapolated, I created little squares and extrapolated averages or circles, and I mean there are at least 20 circles in just this photograph here. 1, 2, 3. There's actually 3 or 4 there. Circle, circle. There's another one there. There's an in between there. There's a channel running there. Circle, 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 circle. There's circles under those trees. Trees do not grow in circles. So when you go on Google and you see trees growing in circles, you know they're growing out of a stone circle ruin. And these are spectacular. All in between here, between the obvious ones, in between all the other ones lie covered by sand and soil. And some of them are really spectacular from the air. Some are really complex and really weird shapes. There's thousands of them. This is just south of Johannesburg. Thousands that cover the hilltops there. And this is just insane. Really, really, really dense stuff that just boggles the mind. The size of the civilizations. And then this is closer to where I live now in Waterval-Boven, and you start seeing the other structures, styles and shapes. By the time I finished counting these, I counted more than 10 million. Not 4,000 or 20,000 or 100,000, way off the mark. And that was a shock to the system for me and everybody else, I guess, because that's not what we expect. And this forces us to reconsider our entire human history. We're dealing with something so completely way off the mark that we're going to throw all our history books away and start from scratch, specifically with reference to ancient human origins. What happened to them? I think this picture tells us a very good, clear indication. Look at the soil sediment. And many of them that lie covered by soil, by meters of soil. And what all ancient cultures refer to, and then the flood came. I believe that this civilization was destroyed 11,500 BC, or 13,000 years ago, when this flood that most archaeologists and geologists and historians agree was this giant event that pretty much destroyed the world. Well, I believe it was that biblical flood that also destroyed this civilization and creates a huge dividing line between a pre-Diluvian and a post-Diluvian culture and civilization. And it is a dramatic difference in living conditions on earth and how people lived and behaved. What's so special about these ruins? Well, these cattle kraal, as you know now know there are more than 10 million of them. There were a hell of a lot of cattle. And they just weren't a lot of cattle. They were very particular and picky cattle. They insisted that many of the kraal were encoded with the sun movements. And when the solstices and equinoxes, these were very intelligent cows, like this one. Shows you where the sun comes up, rises with this beautiful stone in the wall. And then they were not only particular about where the sun came up and set, they were also wanted the stone cattle kraal to be encoded with sacred geometry. And then they were encoded because the cows wanted it. And you can see that the cows were really particular, and when you start seeing these kind of things happening, you realize that maybe this is where the term holy cow comes from. And when you start seeing hexagons, you say, oh my God, these cows are really clever. And what's with these horseshoe shapes? What are these cows up to? And beautiful encodings. This is all the work of Johann Heine, where he spent years and years figuring out, the movement of the sun, the solstices and equinoxes. This is huge, determination and a lot of work to figure these things out, people. It doesn't come easily. So we got to really respect Johann for his perseverance when everybody kept telling him, just ignore it, it's just a bunch of cattle kraal. And then when you extrapolate that flat area into the circle that you overlay, you get a perfect hexagon. You combine the opposing corners, you get a perfect triangle that touches the internal circle. And this is not something that happens by accident, people. And this is stuff that would have taken a great deal of understanding of the sacred geometry, or the rules of heaven and earth, as the Sumerian tablets call it. I love that expression, actually, the rules of heaven and earth. Important to note, there are no doors and entrances. This archaeological drawing from 1939, there are several dozen of these drawings that are found, clearly shows that there are no doors and entrances, and that they're all connected like a bunch of grapes with these roads, these wires, these roads. And they did not find this strange. They present this detailed archaeological report, and they don't find this strange. They don't mention anything about it. They say, oh, these were built by the migrating tribes from the north. That's the repetitive mantra they keep repeating over and over and over again. And then these agricultural terraces that run for thousands of miles. At first you don't recognize them, but when your eyes are opened, you see they cover entire mountains, and they link everything together. Roads running from the river, terraces that cover the entire mountain. There's circle there, circle here, circle there, there's another one over there, and there's more, there's a circle there. And then these weird hexagonal honeycomb-shaped cells that you find scattered among these things. Can you see it's one connected grid? Things do not stand apart and on their own. Everything is connected by this giant spider's web, which are the agricultural terraces. It's a continuous thing. It is actually ridiculous. When you stand here on top of this mountain and you look 360 degrees around you, this is what it looks like, or would have looked like, at least 100 kilometers in a 360 radius. It's larger than any other major metropolitan city in the world today. And that is mind-blowing stuff. These ancient roads and ancient channels seem to link all of the original circles. They were all connected by these roads, like you saw in those archaeological drawings. And they did not find this strange. What they did tell us, though, is that they built these roads. We can't figure out why, so let's just make up the biggest pile of crap we can come up with. And they say they built these roads to drive their cattle on. Yes, they must be to do with cattle, because these are cattle kraal, so these must be roads for cattle. And I'm not kidding you, that's exactly what they put in the most definitive history book on South Africa. They tell you that these roads were built to drive their cattle on. It's spectacular. These people should be fired from their positions at university. The roads link every stone circle, and when you're on the ground, you have no idea that there's a road, that you're looking at an ancient ruin. It just looks like a pile of stones. It's only from the aerial shot that you can really understand this. There's another hexagonal honeycomb bunch of cells over there. fantastic examples. Imagine the whole of Southern Africa looking something like this, or like this. What you're looking at is the largest and most mysterious ancient stone settlement on Earth, and the terraces that cover more than 450,000 square kilometers. This is not what you'll find in any history book. What's all this activity about? Always about gold. You cannot separate human history from gold. It's impossible. We're not going to go into the reasons why, because that's a whole other 2-hour debate. But I think you all know why. But one of the greatest examples of this obsession with gold is we get in Genesis 2 already. When Adam has just been created, he's alone on earth. He doesn't even have Eve to shag it. And he's all alone, running around this beautiful planet, kicking cans, wasting time. So what shall I do today? Oh, so much to do, so many places to see. That's Adam, because he was created, right? Beautiful planet just for Adam. And suddenly God comes to him and says, hey buddy, I want to take you to a place called Havilah, because the land is good and the water is good. And he says, yeah, but the land's good here too. Look, God, it's fantastic where I am here. Why should I go to Havilah? And God says, because there's gold. That's what he says to him. Yeah, what? What we've got to understand with that statement, it's a crucial statement in human history. Because with that one statement, it allows us to separate the big G from the small g, which I refer to as the species of God. And what fascinates me is how many learned people and scholars that have been studying the Bible and ancient texts for years and years keep confusing those two. The divine creator of the universe and all things in it, the fixed rules, sacred geometry, as opposed to the gods of the Bible, the Elohim, the gods of all ancient civilizations, the gods with the small g. The twain shall never meet. And yet people read the Bible in these ancient texts and they often cross the two lines and they confuse the two entities. Please just go through this clearly in your mind. Do not make those mistakes. It's very easy to do that because we get caught up in the stories and we forget who exactly they're referring to from time to time. Wherever there's stone circles, there are gold mines. Circles, stone circles, circles under the trees, terraces, all along that ridge up there are gold mines. These are very special kind of gold mines called added gold mines. They enter the side of the mountain. I saw at least 30 of them the day that I went up there. They were reopened in the 1800s when they were starting the gold mining, the rush in South Africa. And some of them were very active. I should have cleaned my lens. I had a lot of dust on my lens and there was... I'm sorry that I can't show you the whole mine shaft, but I should get a better camera. And it's interesting because these added gold mines, in 2005, this geological company started counting these because they were instructed to count them because this one mining company, I think it was Anglo American, the largest company in the world for the, in the 19th century, from 1900s, Barney Bonato and Cecil John Rhodes' company, Anglo American, they wanted to close it up to prevent illegal gold mining. And for greed, right, money. And they started counting them. Well, 5 years later they stopped when they counted 75,000 of these. And they realized that it's not going to be financially viable to close these up. And that's just in a small area, about 100 by 100 kilometers. Now extrapolate that to all of Southern Africa, we've got millions of gold mines, and these are just added gold mines. And then we get underground, the mines we'll never find because of the flood, right? We'll never find those. Well, I found from 2 independent gold miners in the 30s, at about 100 feet they came across passages similar to this, running in different directions, with tools and artifacts that they couldn't understand. They called in the Merensky Reef people, the gold mining experts. They said, what's going on here? They said, thanks for calling us, we'll take the artifacts, thank you, and they left. They said, we are aware of this. That's the only explanation they gave. But I think they discovered that these ancient underground tunnels of the ancient gold mines of the Anunnaki and Enki's empire. In 1990s, the Beers found a shaft 22,000 feet deep, cut with such perfection and precision that they couldn't explain it. They do not have the technology to do that with. Some advanced laser technology, and I'm going to show you that laser technology. Anglo-American told me that they've got a secret file, that whenever they come across an ancient mine with artifacts or tools or bones or They just cover it up. They cover the evidence. The chief geologist, an Anglo-American, told me over a beer at a birthday party, not knowing who I was. He just volunteered that information to me. Oh, we just recently found an ancient mine. There were some bones at the bottom, about 500 meters deep. 500 meters deep, and they just covered it with soil. It's spectacular how much damage these people do. Who was in charge of this largest gold mining operation ever at the southern tip of Africa? The Sumerian Enki. Sumerian tablets keep referring to it. They keep reminding us. In the Abzu, you now know where the Abzu is. I've shown you the gold mines. So now, whenever you read the word Abzu in any Sumerian text, you know, and you can say with certainty, you know where the Abzu is. In the Abzu, Enki plans was conceiving where to build his house, where for the heroes dwellings to prepare, where the bowels of the earth to enter. Spectacular bit of information, and this is just my favorite. Mighty rivers rushed across the region. Their great waters there rapidly flowed, and abode by the flowing waters Enki for himself established. In the midst of the Abzu, to a place of pure waters Enki betook himself. Now I haven't shown you the pictures of the Zambezi River and the Victoria Falls, the spectacular rivers there in southern Africa. It is spectacularly beautiful. In that land, a place of deepness he determined, for the heroes into earth's bowels to descend. The earth splitter Enki there established, and I'm going to show you the earth splitter. Therewith in the earth a gash to make, by way of tunnels, earth's innards to reach, the golden veins to uncover. I think it tells us all we want to know. Enki is the guy that was in charge of all this. And is there a house or a ruin or a place that we could associate with Enki's house or a dwelling? Absolutely. Great Zimbabwe, the grandest of them all. You can see the structure, very similar kind of circular structures, the architecture. This was Enki's big house on the hill. Many people and psychics that work with energy, they get the meaning very, very quickly. The energy fields that come out of the structure scream Enki all over it. This is what it looks like. It's one of the great ruins in the world. And inside there are these weird conical shapes, conical towers, ice cream cone phenomenon. Except these are big ice cream cones and they're facing the sky. And there's several of them. There are at least two inside of the great enclosure. Inside there. There are at least two of them. There's one there and there's another one over there. But they broke them down when they discovered it. They thought they were filled with gold. It's like, treasure hunters and archaeologists of the last 200 years just drive me nuts. So this is the outside wall. Daryl's standing there. Just to show you the size. It's an impressive structure. But it's very confusing because it's very, very old and it's been reused by thousands of civilizations that have rebuilt it. So it causes a lot of confusion with archaeologists. And then we get to the serpent worship thing, which until recently I thought Southern Africa was devoid of serpent worship cultures. Well, how wrong can you be? Northern Botswana, at a place called Sodilo Hills, is a place known as Mountain of the Gods. And what is it, the Mountain of the Gods? And this is what it looks like. When you go in there, you have to ask the tour guides to take you to the serpent worship cave, because they don't take people there. Nobody knows about it. But Credo Mutwa told me about it. And he told me that this is the serpent worship cave. It's one of the oldest, it's one of the two most sacred sites on earth that's linked to the creation of the human race. He says it's linked directly to the creation of the human race, the serpent worship. There's the stone serpent coming out of the wall. I stand next to it about that tall. It's very big. And then there's some very interesting carvings in South Africa that I find they're linked to the gold mining activity and the protector mascots of the gods, linked to the Zimbabwe birds. But I'm just showing you this to show you this thing runs really deep, but I have to shorten this presentation. These very interesting carved stones that I find all over the place, that I believe actually bird-like prototypes, and you find them everywhere, all over the place, and they're all covered in patina. This is the latest one I found. This broad shape, narrows down to the top, with a neck looking up at the gods for protection. Theodore Bent actually pointed this out, that the same practice was used in Egypt and the Near East, with the birds on pedestals that were the mascots for the gold miners, protectors of the gold miners in Egypt and the Near East. This is one of my favorite ones that I found because it shows us two important things. The shape that was carved out and this reddish skin called the patina. The patina of the rock. And this rock grows this very particular kind of skin. It grows extremely slowly. We know that it grows extremely slowly from some of the breaks that we can date to probably 2,000 years. And so what it does tell us that the patina of this rock grows, arguably, this is a very broad argument, but at least it's a basis for dating some of these things. About 1,000 years per microscopic layer. Okay, now you'll understand the importance of this. It took 500 years for somebody to ask what kind of stones were used to build these. And I was that person to ask, well, did they just use any stones or did they use specific kind of stones? And that was my huge shock and discovery, that they didn't just use any random stones. When I went and investigated these ruins, I found that they used a very special kind of stone. And this stone is known as hornfels in South Africa. It's also known as ringstone, and they ring like bells. Extremely hard stones. It's metamorphosized quartzite, extremely hard. It's a volcanic activity rock. It's got 20% aluminium or aluminum, and 13% iron makes it extremely strong, and it gives it what? Acoustic properties. And it brings us back to sound. And in there I found the huge breakthrough that allowed me to reach these phenomenal conclusions, which is I'm still, rattling with. But these are stones that ring like bells. I'm going to show you two of these that ring like bells. Just these two. Let's quickly. Where is this? What? I'm going to show you some of the most remarkable artifacts that I've collected. This particular stone in my hand here, this beautiful Stone Age club, it looks like something out of Flintstones. I'm going to show you how they ring like bells, because I can't carry these with me all over the world. So a quick demonstration how these stones ring like bells. I just discovered that in geological terms, these stones, this particular stone, the hornfels in South Africa, is also known as ringstone for that very specific reason. And to ring these, I'm going to use my brand new tool that I just collected about a week ago. This phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal artifact.
Ice cream cone.
And I'm going to use this to ring these stones. This looks, we always joked when I found this, that this looks like a Stone Age guitar. And it's pretty much like that, And I want to show you that it is very closely related to the musical instrument in ancient times for a very specific reason. Now you might think that the stone shape is just accidental and that it broke off or something. You'd be mistaken, because I've collected probably about 4 or 5 stones that are very, very similar in shape, very similar carving structure. There's broad base here and then down to a narrow tip, and somebody removed this particular piece of the stone over there for specific reasons, as you will hear, which I'll ring a little bit more. They ring like bells. But it's also important to note that you cannot carve or chip the stone. It will splinter and fragment, and it will not be chipped or carved. Okay, so these shapes that we see here must have been molded in some way, and molded for specific acoustic properties. And this is why. You've got to hold it a very specific way to make as little contact as possible to get it to ring and resonate at its optimum. Now remember, it's also covered in patina, the skin of the rock, this brown reddish color that covers the rock, that is no longer the original black or charcoal color, the original color of the metamorphosized quartzite that's underneath. And that's how it rings. I can actually feel my fingers underneath are deadening the ringing because I'm holding it and it's deadening some of the effect. There we go. That's better. That's what you want. You realize that this thing really rings like a bell and it reverberates for quite a long time. Alright, and I've shown you that this is not the only one. Here's the other one. The Stone Age Club. And I drove over this myself a few times, driving up the mountain on the forest road, and eventually I stopped and picked it up because I realized this is one of the most remarkable tools that you will ever find, and thank God I did. And it is very heavy. I'm out of breath because I'm holding my breath not to make a noise. And this thing weighs probably about 15 kilos. So and there you go. Demonstration how these stones ring like bells. And they were used in all kinds of ways and fashions, just like the Ankh, to create specific vibrational frequencies and specific notes to use as a form and a source of energy. And this is what the stone looks like on the inside. Black charcoal, colored, extremely hard, and then you can see the patina growing on the surface of the stone. And then I started finding these weird anomalous tools. They were all pointed into a shape. Dozens and dozens of these that just don't make any sense. And I started to realize that we're dealing with something very specific that was used for something. It wasn't used for stabbing and punching, because there are no usage marks on these. It's just covered by patina, which tells us that these tools have been lying there for probably way over 100,000 years since they've last been used, or extremely lengthy periods of time. Because when they were originally shaved or carved, shaped into these shapes, they must have been devoid of any patina. They would have been that beautiful black color. And since then they were covered by the patina. And I realized that we're dealing with this ice cream cone phenomenon. And then we find these amazing stones, the sacred stones that shaman in Africa calls sacred stones. They were given to the people by the gods. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these stones. Now once again, here is a huge problem among historians and archaeologists when they try and reconcile what these stones are all about. There are hundreds of thousands of these, but they come from the Stone Age. And in the Stone Age there were hardly anybody living there according to them. So these hardly anybody living there created these hundreds of thousands of stones. Well, I'd like to challenge one of them to make one of these. See how long it takes them with stone tools. For what? Oh, they tell us in the archaeological and history books they were made as weights for digging sticks. That's what these stones are for, weights for digging sticks. So when they could go out digging for roots in the veld, they would use these tools as weights for digging sticks. Now you should be fired for making those kind of comments as well. Because clearly you don't know anything about how difficult things are to make out of stone. And they come in all shapes and sizes. The largest one I've got is probably about this big, but the holes in the middle are only, the range only between 1 centimeter and about 4, maybe 5 centimeters. That's it. And therein lies the clue as to what they were used for. They're perfectly, as you can see from the previous picture, they're perfectly smooth and like concave, like an hourglass shape on the inside. They're spectacular specimens, and they're known as sacred stones. Where's the flagship? Beg your pardon?
How big are they?
This one here is about this size. Okay. That hole is about 4 centimeters, between 3 and 5 centimeters, slightly wider on the outside and slightly narrower on the inside. Where's the flagship among all these ruins? Adam's Calendar. Absolutely. It was rediscovered in 2003 by Johann Heine. That stone broke off there and fell down. We know it because we measured it. And I'm just going to show you a 3D flyby. You can dim the sound on this because the information on this is not accurate anymore. We have discovered a lot more since then. But just to get the effect. Those are the two stones in the middle. That's the north-south line. The stone man standing there cutting right across the two central calendar stones, looking at the sunrise. That's north. Dissects between the two calendar stones perfectly, north-south. And then once again, just to show you the stone man there, looking across the two central stones. These stones here are very special, also that lie on the north-south line. It is at that point that we are told by Credo Mutwa that heaven mated with Mother Earth. I wish these guys would stop speaking in code and parables, you know. So over there is where heaven mated with Mother Earth, and I'll expand on that a little bit. These are the two central stones in the middle, and when I met with Credo, he burst into tears and he said he thought he would never see the sacred place again. He was initiated there in 1937 as a shaman, and he calls it the birthplace of the sun, Inzalo Yelanga in Zulu, birthplace of the sun. I believe the meaning is actually S-O-N and not S-U-N. And it's also where heaven mated with Mother Earth. And he believes, and many psychics have shared this information with me before he even told me, that that's where the Anunnaki actually created or impregnated the Anunnaki females with fertilized eggs, or something to that effect, that then brought forth the species that we are participants in. That's the helicopter shot of Adam's calendar, or Enki's calendar, north, south. As you can see, very important. That's the north-south dividing line from the ground. And this is the view that the stone man would have had about 285,000 years ago. Why do I say 285,000 years ago? There's a wonderful little translation in the Sumerian tablets that says, 40 Shar after arriving on earth, Enki built himself a special place of observing in the deep Abzu on the edge of a cliff. Well, you know where the deep Abzu is. I've shown you where the Abzu is. There's an edge of a cliff. This is a special place of observing, clearly linked to creation of the human race. This is the shamans tell us this. And when you translate 40 Shar, it means that that would have happened 285,000 years ago, based on the calculations of Zecharia Sitchin. So that's the age at which I pitch this right now. And it seems to fit quite snugly into the mitochondrial Eve study as well, that humans suddenly appeared between 250 and 300,000 years ago. Everything seems to fit. There's nothing uncomfortable about these things that fit here. Well, this is the view that the stone man would have had. I believe the stone man had played a very important role in an energetic capacity. This is what he looks like, or it looks like. Unfortunately, it was removed in 1992 by ignorant people. But I just recently found photographs of when it was still in place. That was really our major holy grail, is to find photographs with the stone man being in place. Because until then, we're still speculating. We're just going on hearsay from other people that it used to stand here. Well, just before I left home, about a week before I came to the USA, I get a phone call from the University of Pretoria. The guy, the head of the special photographic department there, says, "Hey, we've been going to that place for 20 years. I've got great photographs of the place before the stone man was removed." So he sent me these pictures, and you're one of the first people in the world to see these. And there he is, still in place, in line with the rest of the alignment. Leaning towards the edge of a cliff, just like all the other stones. That's purely from soil shift. There he is, with the two main calendar stones here.
Whose living room is it sitting in now?
Now he's at the entrance to the Blue Swallow Nature Reserve with a plaque on him that says, commemorating the special opening of the Blue Swallow Nature Reserve by the Ministry of Environmental Affairs. Desecrated the most sacred ancient site on earth. Anyway, why is it a calendar? Because this stone here casts a shadow on that stone there. That's Johann Heine showing me how it all works. He's the guy that decoded it. He did all the original work. So all the praise must go to him for not being put off by the academics that kept telling him, it's just a pile of stones, man. But he didn't listen to them. And the shadow of the setting sun starts here, on this edge, on the summer solstice, and moves across and stops there on the winter solstice. And then it comes back. So you can tell every day of the year by the setting sun, the shadow of the setting sun. You've seen this 3D representation already. And then there's some very interesting stuff, but I don't have time to go into that, about Inanna and Dumuzi. But we believe we have a very strong case for the burial place of Enki's youngest son, Dumuzi, who was buried in the deep Abzu by Inanna on the edge of a cliff. There's another translation from the Sumerian tablets. And if this is indeed Enki's calendar, which I have no doubt, because energetically it also screams Enki at us, then Dumuzi, his youngest son, would have probably been buried near his special place. And Inanna was Dumuzi's beloved. They were like Romeo and Juliet. You could separate them. So I think that if that's the case, we've got Dumuzi's grave. Dumuzi died after the flood, remember? So it's not that old. And this could probably be the oldest statue or carving of Inanna. There are feet over there going up to her boobs, and the head was chopped off. But it's lying among many interesting carved stones like this one, the little sphinx. It's all leading up to Adam's calendar or Enki's calendar. Extended tour, it's a full day tour, and you get to see all this amazing stuff. How do we date the story? You can't carbon date stone. So you got to look for clues and evidence. This is where I always tell people, I feel like the guys in CSI. You know, you follow the clues and follow the evidence, and then you put together a story that makes some kind of sense. Well, the first clues and evidence are this is the bedrock. It's known as Black Reef Quartzite. It's rich in gold. There's an ancient gold mine underneath this mountain here. And this Black Reef Quartzite has nothing to do with every single one of those stones there, which is known as dolerite. Somebody brought this dolerite from somewhere, went to a great deal of trouble to build this calendar site out of dolerite, because it doesn't erode as quickly as the sandstone. It erodes very, very slowly. And it's that erosion that plays an important part in our assumptions as well. The erosion, that piece broke off there. I've asked several geologists, give me an estimate. I won't quote you, but give me an estimate. That there's about 1 centimeter of erosion on that edge where it broke off. And the average number I've been given is pick a year, a number, above 50,000 years. So let's leave it at 50,000 years. 50,000 years ago, this piece broke off there and landed down here. Now it's already giving us an indication. We're going back a long way, people, when this calendar site was built. It's not something that was just built in recent times. The patina growth is spectacular, because the only geological scientific evidence we have is that this patina grows a microscopic layer per 1,000 years. It's very broad speculation. There is no real scientific evidence, but this is what we know. So, here's a monolith in one of the stone ruins that used to have a tip. That tip is broken off. Look at that patina that's going back there. It's about 2 millimeters of patina that's going back. You can see the beautiful black stone under the patina here. That patina growth tells us that we're dealing with something that's probably way beyond 100,000 years old. And this stone has been standing there for all this time. But by far, the archaeoastronomy is the most spectacular evidence. Here you go. You can see the circular structure of Enki's calendar. There's north, there's south, the two calendar stones in the middle. But what you immediately see, that it does not sit at 12 o'clock. There's 12 o'clock. It sits left, counterclockwise, to 12 o'clock. That's not possible, right? But we got very confused by this. When we got it measured, we measured there was a 3 degrees, 17 minutes and 42 seconds deviation, north, south, east, west. What the hell does this mean? We got very confused when we started trying to work out, it's part of the precessional wobble and all that, and going down the wrong rabbit hole. But then suddenly I woke up one day, I said, hold on, this has got nothing to do with precession, because this is true north. We're dealing with true north, people. There's true north. True north-south line of the earth. Not magnetic north. True north. It does not move. Magnetic north moves all the time. True north stays fixed. There's only one instance under which true north can shift and move. And that's the study that our friend Charles Hapgood was trying to sell us all these years in his life. It's called crustal displacement or crustal shift. Well, this is spectacular information. We're sitting with physical, geological evidence that Adam's calendar was built before a crustal shift or crustal displacement happened. And I know that when this information gets out to the geophysicists and the astrophysicists, they're going to get very excited about this, because as far as I know, this is the only physical evidence we have on Earth of this event. And this is spectacular. It's only really sinking in for me right now. What we don't know is when the last crustal displacement happened. But what we do know is this calendar was built before that. So I'll leave that up to you. Orion connection. All ancient cultures are obsessed with Orion, and so is this one. There is no difference here. When you lift up those stones over there, look at that one, beautifully carved into a point. It's spectacular. You know, that's not natural erosion. It's definitely carving or shaping. When you lift those stones up, you get a perfect alignment with Orion's belt rising. But when I asked two separate astronomers, the first one gave me 75,000 years for that alignment to have occurred. The other one, a year later, said, no, you need to go at least 160,000 years. At least it's going back in the right direction, based on my calculation. And could there be a guardian bird of Adam's calendar? Of course. The one, what is the bird or the shape that marks the rise of the sun in Egypt? The Horus bird, right? Well, when you look at this stone lying over there, that's exactly what you find. A beautiful bird-shaped carved stone. The nose is broken off here. There's the inside of the neck, the back of the head. This is a slightly different angle. You can't see the fat belly there. It's got a beautiful fat belly, back of the head. It's probably, if you lift it up, it will probably stand up to about there. It's quite a tall stone, about 3.5 meters. And that's what it looked like. The Horus stone marking the rise of the sun, looking at the 3 stars of Orion. And once again, you link it to the same obsession of all ancient cultures. And then discovering the pyramids. This was taken shortly after Jan Heine discovered Adam's calendar, or rediscovered it. He was measuring it all the time, figuring it out. This is one of the early pictures when you recognize these very distinct pyramidal structures down in the valley. This is known as the Barberton Valley, and the richest gold mine in the world is just left of those pyramids over there, and it's known as Sheba Gold Mine. I wonder if they knew what they were doing when they called it Sheba Gold Mine. And there's a third little pyramid over there, but it's completely covered by soil. It's hardly sticking out. And when I found this, I thought it's very strange. I'm not going to go into the details. What I can tell you is that you lose GPS signal when you stand between them. Completely loses you. I wanted to just get myself, what is the statistical probability that these could be pyramids? Because they're covered by soil, trees and rocks. They could be part of the bedrock. What is the statistical probability? So I went and I decided they did everything by the flow of nature, sacred geometry. So I drew a golden ring spiral. There it is, Adam's calendar, bang, right between the pyramids. So that tells me very distinctly that we're not dealing with an accident here once again. That they went to a great deal of trouble to do this, and it's all connected. And when you connect these pyramids here, Enki's pyramids, to Enki's house at Great Zimbabwe, which we know it is, from all the psychic and metaphysical, it connects with Enki's pyramid, right up in Egypt, all along the 31 degrees east longitudinal line. And this is where we get back to that number 22. 22 letters of the alphabet, who all have numeric values. Well, when you look at the numeric value of the word Elohim, or El, in the Bible, it comes to 31. Numeric value of El is 31. Were they trying to tell us something? I bet you they were. Everything is encoded. I told you earlier, all the cities of the world are built according to a very specific numeric grid that boggle our minds. And we just can't imagine that somebody could be that meticulous and specific in where they place things. But seemingly, it was very simple to these people. And now we get to the crux of the matter. What were these bloody stone circles for? Right? We're talking about sound frequency, sounds, etc., etc. Well, archaeological drawings show us that they were all connected by these roads. And sometimes they look like graves. Sometimes there were concentric circles all connected by these roads. And when I see concentric circles, I see amplification chambers. And I'll remind you what Nikola Tesla tells us: the earth rings like a bell. And you can use the source of sound off the surface of the earth wherever you are as a source of energy. Hans Jenny shows us the manifestation of these sounds as a source of energy that manifest in shape. They're not always perfect. Sometimes they're really badly distorted, right? And I'm going to just show you very quickly. This is just the different frequencies of sound when you just use your voice. I found this on the internet. It's a great example. Maybe just turn the sound up a little bit to hear this. Notice the in-between stages, the slightly erratic shapes. See how sensitive it is? A fractional difference in her voice has a dramatic effect on the shape. Sometimes it's not even the frequency, it's just the tone. Okay. What this shows us is, thanks to the people that put that together. It's a wonderful thing called the CymaScope. And there's some amazing information about what they found with the CymaScope and what we're finding with the secret numbers of God and the whole 3-6-6 ratio. It's just amazing stuff, but not enough time today. So, this is the shape of Om. You've seen the different shapes as they manifest from the sound. The Hindus tell us this is the shape of Om. This is the shape of the vowel A. Sand on a metal plate. This is the shape it'll give you. And you'll see it's not a perfect circle. Sometimes they're very erratic, very strange and weird shapes. So what we're looking at are just the representations of sound frequencies as they're coming out of the surface of planet Earth. That's what this is all about. This is why each one is completely unique. You've just seen the evidence for that. And I must tell you, last year on this tour in San Francisco, I was asked, how did they create these shapes? And my answer to that is because I've been finding these long, elongated stones. They're like these, remember that the stones they're crystalline. That's a metamorphosized quartzite. So it's like a crystal. But it's because of the iron and aluminium, it's got sound properties. It's used for sound and not for light. So they would put these elongated stones in a circle, they would put sand in the middle, and they would activate those stones in a circle by some sort of a sound frequency, activate them. And that would show them, just like you've just seen, the shape of the sound frequency in the middle as it manifests from the earth, right? Well, a week later, a lady by the name of Sandy Mack, who's the head of the Dowsing Association here in the USA, called me up, and she said, I've got to tell you this. I was doing a past life regression of a retired engineer from General Electric, and I took him into a past life in Atlantis, and I thought, let me take him into South Africa, into the gold mines. Bam, he was there. And she asked him, how did they build the stone circles? And he told her exactly what I've just told you. Except the difference was, they didn't use sand, they used ash. And I went, of course they used ash, I should have known that, stupid. But it's, you know, and once again, you've got to ask yourself, from a scientific perspective, the statistical probability for this guy to come up with that information and me, there is no ratio that can define that. So we are telling you the truth. That's what's happening here. So these are the physical manifestation of the energy fields represented by sound frequencies on the surface of the planet Earth. What you're looking at is energetic plug points into planet Earth. And thereby, they're all connected by those channels that link them together so they can share those energetic fields and the energy that they get out of the ground. Not only do they share them through the roads that they're all connected by, but you can see they also channel that energy into the terraces to help the growth of the crops that they were growing. There's a cymatic shape for Hans Jenny's photograph. There's a circle in the middle. There's the spider's web effect, all the terraces going out of it. Here you go. There's a circle. There are the terraces going out away from the side, all connected by these roads. It is so bloody obvious, isn't it? But how much energy could they create? And this is where it really blows your mind. To figure out how much energy they created, we got to take you to Japan in 1944, and what the Japanese called the death ray, which they borrowed from Nikola Tesla. They're going to smite the Allied army with it. But luckily for us, right, they couldn't because they were nuked. And the way they generated the energy in this death ray was with a thing called a magnetron, which is a high frequency, high energy generating device. And how does this work? You create a frequency in the middle, you amplify it millions of times over there, and then you shoot it out through the wires. Every microwave's got a tiny little magnetron in it. So, same thing, same principle, right? Well, it was actually an electrical engineer that sent me this as a suggestion once I started posting these on the website. And he said, these things look just like a magnetron. Well, can you imagine if a magnetron this size, based on the picture of that death ray, could smite an Allied army, how much energy a magnetron 30 meters in diameter can generate? And this is why many of these are these weird flower shaped, because they actually are magnetrons. You can see these strange flower shapes, not because they were pretty, because they were actually the amplification devices. When I showed this to this one lady, psychic lady in Johannesburg, within 2 seconds, like a knee-jerk reaction, I showed her that photograph. She said to me, long before I knew this was all to do with energy, she said, oh my God, this is the device that caused the destruction of Atlantis. Just like this, bang. Now I understand what she meant. Because what I'm showing you here is what the Sumerian tablets refer to as the earth splitter. The energy fields they use this to generate the energy to create the tools to split the earth to get to the golden veins. What you're looking at is one large giant energy grid, all connected, and it's all lying below the soil. Only a fraction of them have been exposed in southern Africa. And now, why we can be so absolutely bloody sure about this is because we measured this. We measured electromagnetic waves, sound frequencies, and their loudness in decibels, and then a heat signature. Now, very quickly, the electromagnetic waves we measure in horizontal and vertical fields. The sound frequency we measure as a frequency in hertz, and its loudness in decibels. And then the heat signature we measure in degrees Celsius, and the maximum degrees it can measure is 80 degrees. This is when the machine can measure up to 80 degrees, at which point it tells you you're standing on top of a geyser or a volcano. Okay, it's a maximum. Remember, it's 100 degrees Celsius is boiling water, 0 degrees Celsius is freezing water. Right? So 80 degrees is extremely hot, but it's actually an average of the temperature about 200 meters down. What's 80 degrees suggests you're standing on top of a volcano, or something to that effect. So, inside the circle, this big circle, we measure, let's start with a small one. The heat signature around the outside is 5.5 degrees Celsius, anywhere outside. The moment you cross into that little circle, it shoots up to 29 degrees. 5.5 degrees, 29 degrees. What? There is no scientific explanation for this, why this should be happening. When you come into the big circle, it shoots up to about 33 degrees in the middle here. Then we measure the sound frequency inside these walls. Nothing outside. Very little sound outside. Inside these walls, 14.5 gigahertz. Now these are not the frequencies that you measure sound in. When you tell people you're measuring sound at gigahertz, they tell you, no, it can't be sound. Well, it is, because it's telling us the decibels of that sound frequency at 72 decibels. And it's only inside these walls. And then the electromagnetic waves inside these walls, just on the inside, it creates like a weird dome effect. 480 megahertz volt direct current, that's what we measured. Very little outside, probably about 20 or 40 megahertz volt ambient electromagnetic outside, but like a dome-shaped effect over this. And then the interesting thing is that this little circle, we measure about 240 megahertz volt electromagnetic waves, but it shoots straight out of the ground into the sky. So here it runs horizontally, there it runs vertically into the sky. Then we go up the mountain, and we get even bigger surprises. this little concentric circle here tells me that it's got amplification properties, and that's exactly what it does. Heat signature outside, about 5.5 degrees. You climb over those walls, inside 58 degrees. 5.5 degrees, 58 degrees. People, this is spectacular information. It's just impossible for this to be happening. Okay? I sent this to Nassim Haramein. He hasn't come back to me yet. I want him to explain to me what he thinks is going on here. I had a chat to him about this. He said, that sounds really interesting. Send me the details. And, you know, anyway. And then we measure inside here, 33.5 gigahertz sound frequencies at 103 decibels. Remember that 110 dB, you start doing eardrum damage. 103 dB at 33.5 gigahertz sound frequency coming out the middle here. This is insane. And then we measure the megahertz volt inside that circle there. It runs horizontally at about 580 megahertz volt, creating like a dome-shaped effect over it. This is why I believe you lose satellite and GPS contact when you go in there. There's another very interesting story we have, but I'm running out of time, so about the ground penetrating radar we did at some of these sites. We did ground penetrating radar at this site here. In which circle was it now? I think, come on, you can do it, buddy. I think it was this one here. And anyway, they thought they were getting GPS signal, and then 2 months later they eventually sent me the report saying, sorry it took so long, but we had real problems with our GPS. I went, oh thank God, because you know when they were doing it I thought your GPS is working in there, but all the other GPSs failed. And then they discovered that their GPS was not working the way that it should be.
Can I ask you something just real quick?
Yeah.
I think I misheard you. You say there's a heat anomaly such that outside that ring you go from about 5 degrees Celsius and inside about 58 degrees
58 degrees
So
Celsius.
from about 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 150 degrees Fahrenheit just as you walk across that boundary.
That's it.
There's a
Yeah, and I'm going to show you something even more. So
there's a heat anomaly just by walking inside of that ring.
Yeah, and you can't feel it. But this is the interesting thing. This is why the cows do go into these circles at night. They automatically get drawn to these circles, even though there's no walls, or the walls are often very low. They climb over them, or they have end parts that have collapsed. They walk into the center of these circles and they sleep there. They obviously feel this heat signature. We don't feel it, but the cows feel it.
Do you hear
Interesting
anything?
stuff.
Do you hear anything?
I don't hear anything, but some people have walked in there and said, wow, can you hear that sound? That's happened to me often. Can you hear that sound? I go, no, I don't hear that. They go, no, I'm hearing a very distinct sound. So all these weird things happen to people. Some people want to be nauseous. Some people want to go to sleep. Some people walk in and they say, no, there's too much weird energy. I can't stay in here. Everything. All different kinds of reactions that we get.
58 degrees measure with a probe? Right?
No, it's not a probe. It's a device it's like a satellite dish that measures the heat signature coming out of the ground, and it's a collective. It's an average of what it. This is the way it was described to me. It's an average. It goes down about 200 meters below the ground, picking up the frequencies.
So it's like a geothermal anomaly
Yes.
in the ground, not an air temperature anomaly.
Not an air temperature.
Cows won't sleep at 150.
No, exactly. No, it's not an air temperature measurement. It's a geophysical anomaly
anomaly in the ground.
that goes under the ground, which doesn't make any sense.
That's
Have you looked at heat signature from the helicopter above?
No, we haven't done that. Yeah. All right, and then we get to Adam's calendar or Encke's calendar, and this is where all of science falls flat. The electromagnetic wave allocation for the United States, or the frequency allocation, ends at 300 gigahertz. Nothing happens beyond 300 gigahertz. That's it. And anything from about 30 or 100 gigahertz up is all secret military aerospace stuff. Okay, most of the activity that we use is up to about 30 gigahertz. So, as you approach, there's a circle of Adam's calendar. As you approach it from there, the average heat signature coming out of the ground is 9.5 degrees Celsius. The moment you cross into that circle, but you see there isn't really a circle. It's an imaginary circle. The moment you cross over there in there, it shoots up to 77 degrees. From 9.5 degrees to 77 degrees. It's just insane. And then you go between the two calendar stones in there, and it maxes beyond 80 degrees. It's moving up and then it just stops because the maximum the machine can measure is 80. So it's still moving in an upward direction when it stops. So it's telling us that there's some serious, like you standing on a volcano, but clearly there's no volcano. Okay? And then the electromagnetic waves inside, around the stones, we measure 1,700 megahertz volt direct current running horizontally. And then in between the stones, it shoots up to 1,800 megahertz volt running vertically straight out of the sky. Now I can understand when the psychics first started telling me that this is an active vortex or an active portal and all these things they told me in the beginning. I'm now beginning to understand what the hell they were talking about. And I'm probably starting to understand what these guys were doing. Adam's calendar, Enki's calendar, seems to have been the central energy device that was collecting all the energy fields from all these other clusters of energy, clusters of energy generating areas, and they were beaming it to Adam's calendar. It was being received by the stone man that was vibrating the two stones in the middle like metal plates, and was creating this weird anomaly that shoots this energy field into the sky. So I'm beginning to think that the gold that they were mining was not necessarily leaving Earth in a physical form, that it may have been transmutated into something else and left the Earth via Adam's calendar in some other form. And after having a long discussion with David Hudson about the transmutation of gold, well, especially when it's in its monatomic state, when it just disappears out of sight, I now firmly believe that this is what these buggers were up to. And then we measured the sound frequencies, and this is just insane. Sound, very little out there. You cross that imaginary circle inside here, it maxes beyond 375 gigahertz. It's insane. There's nothing we use on Earth that goes to those levels.
That's not hard to postulate, because obviously the advanced civilization or whomever created this was not going to use traditional mining to pull metal out of the rock. So,
and now, to show you what technology these guys used, we've identified that they used the sound frequency from Earth. I showed you the Earth splitter, which we believe they also then caused the destruction of Atlantis at a later time, because they misused the energy fields. That's how much energy those Earth splitters or those giant magnetrons can generate. We can't understand the amount of energy that those things can generate. And clearly I've shown you the physical and scientific evidence that they're still generating the energy right now. They're giving us this energy. We just don't know how to use it. 2 or 3 years ago, they discovered this Saser technology, not laser. Laser is light amplified by the stimulated emission of radiation. Saser is sound amplified by the stimulated emission of radiation. Using sound to focus sound into a beam to do amazing stuff with. They're so excited about it because the best application for Saser technology is, guess where? In the military. Yeah, of course. So they're very excited about that. Well, I got news for them. The ancients were using this 200 and 300,000 years ago already. And that's what these sacred stones were all about. These were the tools of these ancient guys, not made out of flimsy stuff that breaks. They use stone because stone is filled with energy and is useful as a tool that does not break. Once you make it, it'll last forever. Here's the evidence. It's just a frequency converter. The satellite people still use a thing called tubing today. Bring a satellite feed down from the sky, put it through a little tube, a pipe, and they convert the frequency, take another frequency out. Very cheap way of converting frequency. They do that today, I'm not kidding you. So that's just a short tube. Bring a frequency in, converts it, another frequency out. Whatever that frequency is that you want. What do you do with that frequency? Like you do with a laser beam. You bounce it up and down millions of times, you focus it through the quartz crystal that focuses into a beam. You take it in there, you focus it through what? You focus it through a quartz crystal. A point. The ice cream cone phenomenon that focuses the sound into a beam, which you can use as a laser beam, and except in this case it's a Saser beam that we've just rediscovered. And there you have it. A very advanced ancient tool that can create incredibly powerful sound lasers, Sasers, with which they could do all this amazing stuff that we're only rediscovering today. And it's interesting that the 3 centimeters aperture there is equal to 10 gigahertz. So it tells us that 10 gigahertz is a very important frequency that these people use. So by just reverse engineering the thought process, we can start to figure out what these bastards are up to. So the conclusion is that we are reaching the end of a weird kind of prophecy. As above, so below, and the end days will be as the first days, because that seems to be going round and round. All ancient cultures talk about this. And we seem to be rediscovering free energy from the earliest people on earth. And I think that's spectacular, because we all desperately looking for free energy. And since everything is linked to sound, from Hinduism and Christianity and Egyptology and everywhere else, sound is primordial creative source. Surely we can do everything with sound. And you're bloody right. Here's a guy in New Zealand, a guy called Peter Davey. He's been boiling water with sound for more than 40 years. He's 94 years old today. He's still trying to sell his device for millions of dollars. I don't know why. Why doesn't he just share this information with the world? Because you realize what this implication is for our planet, is that with a car battery and a little solar panel, you can provide all the energy requirements for the United States and the entire world. How much water do you want to boil? It doesn't matter. You can boil it with sound. And therein lies the biggest, I believe, secret in what we're stumbling upon right now. So any of you who have the ability to go and do this research in laboratories or whatever, go and do it. Encourage others to go and do it. Boil water with sound. Find the frequency that boils the water. Because that'll be the ultimate liberation of the slave species overnight. Where'd you from here? What do we do with all this knowledge? And this is just to wind up. I have 15 minutes left. So, there is no happy outcome to the political and economic mess of the planet. I'm sure it's painfully obvious to every one of us. Every year it gets worse. People live in misery. Every year it gets harder to survive. And somehow our supposed leaders that are supposed to do what we want them to do the opposite. They make it more and more difficult for us to survive, right? What do we do when this system collapses? Because if the monetary and economic system collapses, which I have no doubt it will, how are we going to respond? If we don't have some sort of a blueprint or an idea of what to do as a united community. Remember right in the beginning I told you we're a deeply divided species. Well, if we remain a deeply divided species, we will die like flies, deeply divided, fighting each other for a loaf of bread. Well, that clearly can't be the case. We need to find another ideology or a system to take us into the new age, 1,000 years of peace. Now, how's that going to work? I need to remind you of our inalienable rights that we have completely forgotten about through the torment that we are all exposed to. The country belongs to the people. It does not belong to the politicians or the priests or whoever. It belongs to its people. The land, the water, the minerals, the air, the forests belongs to the people, not the politicians. We have appointed the politicians to do the best for us. We're in charge. But somehow something has gone dramatically wrong, because that's not the case, clearly. The politicians have assumed charge and they do what the hell they want, right? The only conclusion we can reach is that the politicians have stolen the country from its people. And just they've done exactly that in a simple and dramatic fashion. Every social political system we've had has failed us since the earliest of times. Money was maliciously introduced as a tool of enslavement. It's painfully obvious. And a small group of royal political elite whose bloodlines continue to torment us are in control of the world, and out of which we get these secret societies. It all started with Sumerians. I am now more convinced than ever before. I've shown you a few very tiny examples of why I believe. When kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, when they appointed the kings and priests and gave them the advanced knowledge and the knowledge of writing, and with that knowledge they started to lay down the rules by which we are still governed today. The laws of Hammurabi is the foundation of Roman Dutch law today. That's where it all started, with the bloody Sumerians. When kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven. And it now is painfully clear that money is the obstacle to all progress. And bankers decide whether you can follow your dreams or not. Not your mother, your father, or your priest. Or bankers decide whether you can follow your dreams. That's clearly a sick society we've allowed to evolve around us. So, to solve this problem is simple. Remove the obstacle. Remove money. Oh boy. many people run for the hills when you say this. But how's it going to work? Who's going to pay for stuff? It's like, you don't have to pay for stuff. It's all there. The world is full of stuff. Everything we need is here, right here. Just look around you. Well, you don't need money. You need love, food, shelter, water, art. I know that word culture came up in a slightly different way. You don't need money, but we've been so poisoned to think that we need money to have all the stuff. No, that is not the natural order of things. The natural order is completely without money. So, I call this system contributionism. You can go onto my website, contributionism.org. I've posted a lot of interesting ideologies there and how the system works. But very basically, it's a spiritual and a conscious movement that works without money. A new social structure for the survival of the people of this planet, where everyone contributes for the greater benefit of all in the community. There is no money. There is no value attached to anything. Everyone's contribution is infinitely and equally valuable. There is no barter. There is no trade. Don't get confused with that. Barter and trade cannot be part of the solution. It is not a utopian dream. It is the natural order of things, and it's taken me 6 years to be brave enough to stand up in front of people and say this, because I've managed to figure out some of the most obvious problems. Because boy, it's easy to shoot me down from down there. Very easy, because the answers are simple. Well, how is this going to work? How is that going to work? It's taken a long time to figure out, but you know what? Each one of you has all those answers. All you have to do is remind yourself, no money, no barter, no trade, no value, no hierarchy. Because in a world without money, there is no crime, no envy, no gluttony, no greed, no hoarding, no hierarchy, no obstacles to any progress. We're dealing with unbridled, absolute abundance on all levels, from rocket science to shoemaking, to glass blowing, to food growing, an abundance on all levels. So amazing that it boggled my mind at first. I thought there's something wrong with this model, there's too much stuff. and that's when it hit me. That's how brilliant these controlling groups are. They know this. They know this. And that's why they tie us up running around with this thing called money and the legal systems. And the stuff is so complicated. And all we spend all our lives is with getting out of trouble, complications, earning money to survive, paying rent, buying milk and bread. And suing people because we need money. I mean, it's just insane, right? It's this, caught up in this rat race of stuff. Imagine if you reverse that. In a contributive society, you'll spend 90% of your time contributing to the greater benefit of all. Because you don't have to worry about where the food's going to come from, because that's what everybody does. They do their bit. Everything is available to everyone, so there's no hoarding, as I said. Unbridled inventions, free energy, overnight, when you remove money. The obvious questions are, who's going to shovel the crap? That's what people ask. I've got like a list of questions, and I want 50 Ferraris. If everything is free, I'm going to sit you on my ass, I want 50 Ferraris. You can clearly see that's not how it works. You're not going to want Ferraris, because a Ferrari is an extension of your ego and the size of your penis, right? The inverse, yeah, exactly, yeah. And when you've got free energy and levitation devices and everything is free, you don't want a Ferrari. What's a Ferrari? So you all have the answers. I know at first it's a bit like, okay, how's the education going to work? How's this going to work? It's so simple when you start thinking about this. It's a beautiful, utopian, natural order of things. Who's going to shovel the crap? Well, to answer that very simply, is that for every budding artist who wants to, or Michelangelo who wants to carve the next David, there is a budding, desperately keen scientist who wants to solve the sewage problems of the world. And they're equally passionate about that as that. And if you remove money, they can express their creativity in the areas that they operate in. Without, there's no money to create a device that's going to, destroy crap. Well, the technology uses, but when you go to the bank to say, I want to launch this device that destroys crap, they say, we don't see a future for that, so we can't fund that. It's insane, right? So you have all the answers. So what's interesting about this as well, just like we go back to Africa to find the roots, find free energy from the earliest cultures, we seek to go back to Africa to find this social structure that I've just described to you. In Africa, it's called Ubuntu. And I just recently realized that there's a free software thing that's called Ubuntu. And it's amazing how it's just accidentally happened, right? So Ubuntu, where children are allowed to follow their passion and natural talents, where their talents are enhanced by master teachers with the same talents, not watching the clock waiting to retire so that they can contribute with their natural skills and talents to the greater benefit of all in the community. Simple philosophy, where everything is abundant. And because of the abundance, we only have to work and contribute a small amount of time every day to have this absolute abundance. What happens next? The rest of the time we spend on our own personal growth, on arts and consciousness and enlightenment. And that's the trap they've caught us in. Don't give the people time to practice their arts and consciousness, because then they'll wake up really quickly. And that is the real absolute message in this. The moment you remove money, the consciousness will explode. Totally. I'm so glad you got that. So, Ubuntu, contributionism. Out of unity comes infinite diversity. Thank you very much for listening.